Next, we have up a discussion about the aquatics plan. Mr. Hudding is. Did you get out the blocks like that when you ran track back in school?
I was a little faster. How'd you know I ran track?
I can tell by the way
You can.
got up
Okay,
out that
great.
seat and you was moving.
So we're gonna switch up from transportation to recreation. This is a joint work session for the Aquatics Master Plan and the Gates Park Master Plan. I want to thank the Leisure Services Commissioners who are sitting out here, as well as members of the focus group who have given us some valuable public input on what they would like to see at Gates Park in particular. So Gates Park and Burns Park have stood out for many, many years from our other parks as the anchors of our Waterloo Park system. And tonight, it's our opportunity to present to the council members and the commissioners the highlights of two master plans that ultimately we hope will lead to transforming both Gates and Burns Park. Both of these parks have shortcomings currently, and what spurred this entire discussion is the condition of our pools. Darren Barr with Ballard King is going to follow me up and lead us through this, but we also have Mark Kuiper and Ritland Kuiper Associates here to present the Gates Park Master Plan. We do want to thank, as long as I've got the mic, those who have helped us with this. The Blackhawk County Gaming Association has helped us fund the Aquatics Master Plan. And for the Gates Park Master Plan, we've had help from Young Family Foundation, VGM Employees Group, and the 2021 RAGBRAI Committee. So we got a lot of partners in this, and it's a very exciting project. So with that, I'm going to introduce Darren Barr, and he'll lead us from here. Thanks, Darren.
Thanks, Paul. Everybody hear me okay? Great. Myself and several others are going to speak this evening. We're going to try and be as good with your time as we can, but this might be a little bit like drinking from a fire hose. We're trying to stick with a water theme. But this is our agenda, what we're going to try and cover tonight. Just a little bit about the process, which Paul talked about. We're going to talk about the conditioning of the existing city facilities, sort of the process that we went through for this master plan, the public input that we received in Burns Park, Gates Park, and then leave some time for questions and answers. So with that, this question wasn't really popular, but it was one that we asked at the very beginning of the process is, when I looked at Mark and Paul and the rest of his staff and said, should we really be in the business of continuing to offer aquatics as a city function? And it was a pretty adamant response of yes. The city is very committed to offering the facilities and the programs. There's a really strong feeling that swimming, learning to swim, access to pools, pool use, aquatic use is a life skill. As a former competitive swimmer, I tend to lean that way, but as a consultant, I try and not wear that hat very often. The other real hallmark that the city staff talked about was the affordability. Whatever we went ahead and did, we needed to go ahead and improve our financial position and not try and subsidize the aquatics facilities to the extent that we are right now. But we also needed to make sure that our pools were accessible and affordable for all of our residents. So what we've done is we've gone through that whole process. We've talked with folks. We've asked a lot of questions. We've gone ahead and we've done this using statistical data and public input to try and make sure that we provide you with a plan that gives you direction into the future. It's not a set in stone plan. It has some movement to it. You have a very capable Parks and Recreation staff, so we didn't want to try and be heavy-handed with the plan, but at the same point, we wanted to provide some options and directions. Again, my name is Darren with Ballard King & Associates. We're a facility planning firm. Have Matt Freeby from Water Technology, who went ahead and did some of the physical assessments, along with Mark from Ritland Kuiper. So you're going to hear a little bit of each of us. So the existing conditions, and Matt's going to come up and talk about this here for us, but I've worked with Matt for about 15 years doing this, and this was the first time I've ever heard him make a statement like this. But when we were on site in July, Paul and Mark were sitting down and we were talking. They said, so what's the condition of our existing pools? And Matt looks over at him, and before I think he knew what he was saying, and at the same point, I think it's a good quote to share. He said, if you called me when I was on the car ride home today and told me that the pools had failed, I wouldn't be surprised. So if you're going ahead and if you're talking about what kind of life expectancy do we have left in our 2 outdoor aquatics facilities, you're beyond it. You're beyond that life expectancy. And to that extent, there needs to be a little nod of the head or acknowledgement of the park staff that have kept the aquatics facilities up and running to this point. I think probably in the month of March, April, they probably do a little dance and say something, go pray or whatever they need to do to make sure that when they hit the start button on Memorial Day that something starts. But they've done an extremely good job with these facilities. So Matt, do you want to come up and walk us through the existing conditions real fast?
Didn't know he was going to use that quote. A little frightening, but he's correct. That's not something that I say lightly. In fact, it is the first time I've had to say that. It has to do with the pool shells, but let's go through what we're looking at and what some of the conditions you have are. Quick question for you. How many of you have been out and used these pools? So you see what I see then, and probably looked at it, but have you gone into, say, the pump room or looked at some of those pieces? Anyway, if we can, going through the conditions, Burns Park, first of all, the 2 pools are basically the same age and the same type. They are Chester aluminum pools, which means they have a concrete floor. They have an aluminum wall system, which is buttressed. In other words, there's a brace behind the wall panels that hold them in place. That's going to become important in a few minutes. General condition assessment is that they've been maintained, but they've been maintained over the past 10 to 20 years by gosh and by golly. That's not anything about the staff. It's what they've had to work with and some of the challenges they've had to work with. For instance, the images you're seeing of Burns here, piping is no longer supported. The pipe supports have rusted away. You have movement in pipe that could fail. Your electrical boxes are rusted not only on the exterior, but some of the, you're probably going to start seeing some arcing in some of that. So condition is just generally poor. Next slide. You got it? Oh boy, take care of it. In terms of, good. The major thing with the pool shell is that you're starting to see bowing in the pool shell. And the bowing, most of the time when people think of pool shells like this, they think they're going to bow because of the water. Because the water weight is pushing against that buttress. In this instance, what you've had is subsidence in the behind the pool wall. And so water has gotten in there. It's caused some of the soil to sink. And now the bow is actually into the pool itself, which means that those buttresses are no longer in compression, they're in tension, which is not how they're designed to be operating. What happens is that opens up, it's tough with the pictures, but it opens up the joint between the deck and the pool wall, allowing more water to get in there. More water means more subsidence of the soil behind it. More subsidence of the soil means it bows out a little bit more, which puts more tension on the system, eminently leading to failure. Next slide. And you can, whoops, I'm sorry. Gates. No, I'm sorry. I was going to show something from the previous slide, but that's okay. Gates again. Some of the conditions are they're not cosmetic conditions. They aren't things that can just be polished or cleaned or buffed out and then repainted. It really is some serious conditions in terms of the deck, piping supports. The filters are outside. They're starting to unspool in terms of their fiberglass and things like that. So the condition is basically at the end of its useful life and should be planned accordingly. In summary, any questions? I know I'm covering a lot real fast. Yeah, and some of the things are just odd. For instance, in the left-hand picture, the in-wall steps where people used to get out and the handrails are just not in the same spot. That's easy to fix, but there's just a couple of odd things like that. And then the deck, the gutter profile where some of those panels have come loose. That's a safety concern, and those things need to be maintained and kept up. And some of the parts are missing and things like that.
You mean those steps weren't just because that's where you dive in?
I'm sorry? Oh,
Man.
okay.
Terrible
It's a big
condition.
shift. Thanks, Matt. To give you an idea of just the process that we've gone through beyond and where these things sort of fall, is we started with our kickoff meeting and we've done market assessment data, we've done public input. Matt just talked about the on-site. We sort of bumped that to the front of the discussion because we felt like that sort of sets the baseline for the rest of the discussion. We've gone through another set of public input, facility recommendations, and we've gone through some operational planning. So one of the things that is important is to understand whatever we do in the future, what kind of reality are we going to deal with in terms of revenue generation and cost centers and those types of things. So we are in the process of going ahead and putting the draft master plan together. When we started taking a look at the market, we went ahead and we looked at the city of Waterloo proper. We looked at a 5-mile radius surrounding the Cedar Valley Sports Complex and then 1-mile radius around each of the outdoor pools. You cannot go ahead and do a study like this and ignore Cedar Falls. You have to go ahead and at least acknowledge that it's there and acknowledge that a percentage of your population is going to go there to use facilities and services. So we didn't highlight that, but that is something that's there. There is a significant population. The diversity fluctuates based on the location, whether you're going ahead and looking at the full city or just the area surrounding Gates or the area surrounding Burns. The median age is lower. That goes ahead and points to families. It points to the university. It points to people who use pools, who are around water, who like to be around water. And the income fluctuates as well. And it's always unfortunate when we go ahead and we bring that up, but it's the reality of the fact that somebody has to pay for the facility. Somebody has to pay to participate in the facility. So again, sort of like Cedar Falls being right to the west, we can't ignore the fact that people have to be able to access these facilities. One of the things that's pretty stark and pretty interesting when you look at it is the map on the right goes ahead and shows all the different pools that are around you. If it is a red dot, it's an indoor pool. If it's a blue dot, it's an outdoor pool. If you went back 40 or 50 years when these pools were first constructed, there would not be that many dots on the map. There would probably only be 2. There would be the one at Gates and the one at Burns. So over time, your market for services, your market for participation in swimming in Cedar Falls, not in Cedar Falls, in Waterloo, has gone ahead and has decreased just because there's more pools out there. Now, some of those pools are very simple. It's a 6-lane, 25-yard outdoor pool. But if people have the option of going ahead and sending their kid up the street on a bike with $1 to get into the pool and maybe $1 for a snack versus going ahead and driving the 15 to 20 minutes, they choose the first one more often than not. So we went ahead and took a look at that. So using some information from the National Sporting Goods Association, we were able to determine that approximately 16.1% of your population participates in swimming. When you go ahead and when you apply that to the population of age 7 and over, that's about 10,000 people approximately. And those 10,000 people generate somewhere in the neighborhood of 447,000 pool visits over the course of a year. Those aren't specific to pools in Waterloo. They're not specific to Cedar Falls. They're not specific to those dots on the map. But if you went ahead and if you talked with people and talked about how many times they went to a pool over the course of the year and you aggregated those numbers, regardless if that pool was on an island in Hawaii, whether it was in the desert in Abu Dhabi, that's where the number would likely go ahead and come out to. So it's a significant number. Those age ranges that you see at the bottom on a national level, the highest rate of participation in swimming is from the 55 to 64 age group, followed by the 12 to 17, followed by the 7 to 11. So when you start talking about that lower median age and the presence of those populations, that sort of backs up that participation percentage. We went ahead and we did some fun, I call it fun, public input outside of the survey. We went ahead and we had a focus group meeting with the lifeguards. Their requests were pretty simple. We'd really like a clock that worked at the pool. We'd like Wi-Fi. We would like somebody to make sure that there's not bees, lifeguard stands that didn't feel like they were going to fall over. So it took them about 20 minutes to get through that list before they started to dream. And then once they started to dream a little bit, then we kind of had to pull back the reins and say, no, we can't put a sand volleyball court that floats in the middle of the pool. But anyways, they had fun with it, which was good. But it was also fun to go ahead and hear from them just some of the baseline things that we would assume a new facility has that would make their lives easier. So they're not struggling to the same degree that the Parks Department is to maintain the pools, but they're finding workarounds for some of the challenges that the facility presents itself. In addition to that focus group, we did another series of focus groups and stakeholder meetings. We did an online survey. When we did that survey, we really focused on programs. We didn't ask people, do you want a 50-meter lane, or do you want a 25-yard lane, or do you want a stationary wave or a speed slide, or any of those kinds of things. We focused on programs that could take place at an aquatics facility, with the idea being that if we focus on those programs, we can go ahead and, with our knowledge and with help from water technology, prescribe bodies of water that could accommodate those programs and that could differentiate the facility from what they are now. Key findings out of the survey: we had almost 1,000 people respond to the survey, which was very good. About 56% of those were residents. The top 3 aquatic programs that you went ahead and that you heard about was open swim and recreation swim. Number 1, by far, no questions asked. Followed by lifeguard training, which I was a little surprised about, right? We're going ahead and nationwide, it's sort of a lifeguard shortage right now, but everybody feels like we need to have a pool where we can train lifeguards. And all the aquatics professionals are saying, boy, I wish I had enough lifeguards to go ahead and run a full lifeguard class. So, but that's a legitimate concern. Followed by swim lessons, which the nice part about that is that aligned very, very closely with what we heard out of the department, that the offering swim lessons and teaching that life skill is a priority. We heard that if a facility could accommodate the programs that were most desired by respondents, 68, almost 69% of those folks said they would visit the pool at least on a weekly basis. There was only approximately 5.6% of respondents that said, regardless of what you put at the facility, I'm never going to go there. We also found out that approximately 56, almost 57% said that the pool is a high to very high priority, a new pool. We didn't say a new pool where, we didn't say a new pool specific. We just said how high of a priority is a pool that could accommodate the activities that are most important to you. Some of the biggest obstacles to aquatics that we heard from the survey: cost to use, location, weather, hours of operation, availability, and funding. And funding was funding for the operation, funding for the construction, those types of things. Those are responses from your residents and some outside. We also asked a question about what was missing from the park system. And this is not a definitive list, but if you're looking at themes, there didn't seem to be an order of priority in terms of what got top priority. Is it maintenance? Is it development? Those kinds of things. Outdoor basketball, fields, handball, ice skating, parks, pickleball, playgrounds. There was a little bit of a longer list. It was hard to narrow down exactly what that was, but those were just some of the things that were identified. We got to this point and we'd gone ahead and we'd done operation. We hadn't done operations. We reviewed operations. We reviewed the facilities. We'd done demographic work. We had done public input, and we all sort of looked at each other around the table. And I can't remember if it was Mark or Paul, but somebody asked the question, have we heard enough from folks that are either current or future users of Gates Park? And we hadn't. We just hadn't. So we went ahead and working with the Parks and Recreation staff, we went ahead and did a special focus group for Gates Park and Gates Park Pool. And I don't know, Felicia is going to come up and is going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we went ahead and we heard in that brainstorming session.
Good evening. Leisure Services took great time and great effort to actually talk to and listen to people that live here and use this park. And they were candid, sometimes difficult talks on, well, what's going to happen? What's happening with our pool? What are these next steps? And the cool part is they got to first ask, what do you want? What do you want to see? In your dream scenario, what do you want to see? Now, we got awesome too, because one of our suggestions what was a swim up bar, but as we moved through what was necessary and then got to dream, we were brought back. And so once we had a sketch, then we were still involved in that part of the talk. The other piece is the neighborhood association was engaged, and even when there were follow-up questions, we had private Zoom calls to go through and talk folks through this piece. There was great time and consideration on what Gates Park and Gates Pool means to this community. So there was great care. We have some people that were with our group, if you would wave, but the impact team, and Mr. Moses and Mr. Spencer all came and shared. We had about 10 more folks, and other groups that I'm doing grant work with, I kind of shot this in the air with them and just got feedback. The biggest piece was having something kids could access and people would use a lot. And what we got back was pretty incredible. I think you all are going to be blown away too, like I was. Anything else? No.
Thank you. So, piggybacking on that, some things that we heard out of there, and I don't want to repeat, but the idea that the park had been forgotten a little bit, and the neighborhood around it, along with it, but that there needed to be a transformational investment in the park, and that transformational investment was reflective of what the community wanted. It didn't have to be a traditional body of water or traditional pool along those lines. So what we've gone ahead and what we've done, Ballard King has done, is we've gone ahead and we've made some recommendations. If you just look at statistics that are produced by the National Recreation and Park Association, so if you want to just approach it from a statistical perspective, it would tell you that the City of Waterloo population can support 1 indoor aquatic center, which you have, and about 1.5 outdoor aquatic facilities. Now, what's an outdoor aquatic facility? What does support mean? All those different kinds of things. This is just statistical data that they've collected over time. Some communities skew one way or the other. So if you look at it from that, but then we have all this other data that we've layered on top there as well. What we're talking about is that BYRNES Pool should be replaced in some way, shape, or form, and we have some suggestions for that. We're also talking about Gates Park being master planned and that a spray pad of some variety be included in that master plan. When we look at BYRNES Park first, what we recommended was 3 separate bodies of water. We looked at a 6-lane, 25-yard lap pool. We looked at a lazy river with the catch pool for a slide tower, and then a zero depth entry pool. The fun part about that is that you can have multiple programs and multiple activities going on at the same time. Right now, one body of water, there's not a lot of opportunity to do multiple activities. With this, we can have something going on in the current channel or lazy river, something in the zero depth entry, something in the lap pool, all simultaneously. Let's go ahead and say that there's not enough lifeguards one evening. Well, we can close the lap pool and we can keep the zero depth entry and the current lazy river going. In the morning time, you can have people swimming laps and walking with the current channel. There's just a lot of opportunities for programs. We're also talking, you'd have to replace filtration and water treatment. It would increase the total water surface area. When we were on site, it was kind of interesting. You'd go ahead and you'd see everyone gathered in the shallow portion of the pool, making sure that I'm not talking too much, which I am. But not a lot of people were using the deep water, but we're still including that because that's important for that lifeguard training, for some of that life skill stuff. But again, talking about some of the opportunities that are there. This is just a SketchUp, and it's overlaid on top of the current location that sort of talks about that zero depth play pool, the current channel with the slide tower. There are 2 slides. One could come out into sort of a water flume, very shallow water, and the other one would go ahead and could be a tube slide that comes into the current channel. And then you see the lap pool off to the side. When we talked about a spray pad and we talked about one specific in the Gates location, you already have one in the city and it's already really popular. So I think that's an important statement to make, that you've already sort of established that there's a market for this type of facility in the community. And when we've gone ahead and we've done some research and we've been involved doing this across the community, spray pads have often been used to fill some equity gaps and to go ahead and create more access across communities. When they've done that, and how they do that is expanded hours. This is something that would be a park amenity, right? So it's available from the time the sun comes up to the time the sun comes down. If somebody wanted to go and play in the spray pad at 10 a.m., unless there was maintenance being done or something else going on, that'd be a real possibility. Expanded operating season. In many cases, you're finding these that would open in this portion of the country. You'd have those up and running in early May and could potentially run all the way through the month of September. And what we were talking about is something that would be free to access. So Water Technology's gone ahead and provided us with some images of approximate size or scope of what we've been talking about. This gives you a schematic and then a side-by-side with the schematic drawing and then an overview. We're not just talking about something that would go ahead and would bubble up and sprays. It has some play features to it. We've seen these where they've gone ahead and they've been equipped with a theme of some variety. There's seating around the outside. There's shade around the outside. It is counterintuitive, but that's one of the number one things we hear when you talk about outdoor aquatics is we got to have ample shade. Not everybody likes to get burnt like I do. Some different pictures and different views of what you can go ahead and do. We find a lot of times pavilions are close by and people will say, well, I'm going to reserve a pavilion and I'm going to have my son or my daughter's 10th birthday party. And I'm willing to pay for that pavilion rental to do that. I always joke with people that the amount of money that I was willing to pay not to have the birthday party in my house was absurd and maybe obscene in some cases. And some more pictures that goes ahead and just really gives you an idea of what the character is. We're not suggesting that you're just rolling out a hose and a sprinkler and saying, hey, we have a spray pad. We're going ahead and we're thinking about a well thought out structure that is going to go ahead and enhance the rest of the park. And with enhancing the rest of Gates Park, the city went ahead and worked with Ritland and Kuiper and went ahead and had them do some master planning that gives you a little idea of what some of that dream process was looking like around Gates. So Mark's going to walk us through that.
And again, if there are questions as we go, that would be great as the slides are up there, but I'm going to go through the images and the concepts. They are going to come at you kind of fast, and I'll just try and illustrate or describe what's on the screen. So for the first plan, kind of an overview of the north end of Gates Park, and really we'd be looking at the lower area on the south bottom left portion would be where the parking facility would be there, and then the existing parking facility for the pool would also be kind of redone. So those would be the parking support areas. The existing recreational trail that comes into the park from the northwest corner from along Donald Street, that is maintained. We're actually connecting to that and creating access to the lower area where the splash pad and the inclusive playground would be located. And then that trail would connect to the upper area, which would then be an outdoor basketball area and also be a performance venue. There'd be opportunities for roller skating, to have outdoor concerts. And then that would also be a large picnic pavilion when it wasn't being used for one of those performances. And there'd be restroom support facilities for all those. So I'll kind of step through those as we go into the detailed plans for each. Looking at the top portion now, so you see the basketball court facility. The performance pavilion would be in the center of the screen, the larger structure, and the restroom would be adjacent to that. It'd be accessible parking. It's kind of hard to visualize right now, but we're actually taking that area, and right now where the pool is located is on a very high elevation. It's actually about 15 feet above Donald Street, and so we're actually dropping that about 8 feet. And by doing that, we actually create this amphitheater effect. So the idea would be we would preserve the existing vegetation, these large, beautiful trees that are there. We would be able to preserve those because those are around the pool. But by pressing that area down, we actually create this amphitheater effect that not only is amazing for being in that space, but also provides the noise attenuation. It'll be great for neighbors, it'll be great for golfers. The idea is just to create an awesome outdoor venue protected somewhat from the elements, providing some of that sound control, but also just being downright beautiful to be in. And we really I played in the Gates Park Youth Basketball League, and so the idea of being in this venue, playing in that, it makes me want to get my shoes back on. So,
We'll hold you to that.
yeah, yeah, that won't be hard. So that's kind of that space. And again, we can come back to these, but I'd love to spend more time on each one, but kind of a detailed view, then if you're down on the court, what that would feel like being in that space. Our hope is that it would be lit and there'd be good sound and lighting for that stage, and that would just be a great space to be in. Then moving on to the lower level, we kind of had a preview of the splash pad look. I'll kind of look at that, as well as the inclusive playground. And those are both served off of that parking lot by an entry plaza. And then the idea would be that both of these areas then would be gated and fenced separately. So a parent could be in the splash pad area, and they would be able to sit near the entrance to that and know when their child is in the splash pad area and know when they were going to leave and be given permission to do so. And then be able to go over to the inclusive playground and back and forth. But the idea is that you wouldn't be able to really get in there except for that one entry for both areas. The building in the middle would have 4 separate family restrooms, as well as the mechanical room that serves the pump and filtration system for the spray pad. So the spray pad itself, the idea is that we'd have those spray features, and then there's actually a change in elevation to that. The hope would be we'd be able to actually have spray features slightly on an elevated plane, and the water would be able to trickle down in sort of a really slow-moving stream that kids could play with, and maybe even manipulate the water in that. Just having that change of grade and working it into the grade, having the mounds behind it with the stone and the plants nearby, but also protecting those water areas from having that interaction with mulch and that kind of thing. So working with the consultants to make sure that those entities work well together. But that kind of gives a feel for entering into that space, the restroom building to the right, looking north. And then the inclusive playground, to go into just a bit of detail with it, the pathway that winds on the right-hand side of this, that kind of looks like a snake with a circle on the top, that's actually a slow-moving ramp that ascends 6 feet to the top, and then that actually forms a bridge access to the top of the play structure. So the idea that somebody anybody with any kind of physical disability would be able to access the coolest parts of this park, and that's part of the inclusivity, not just providing handicap access, which is kind of the way that accessibility starts, and I think that's a great step. But the idea is to make each of these play elements separate features that parents, children of all abilities could be interacting with, and having lots of not only areas with physical challenge, but kids able to explore their physical, mental abilities at different times, interacting with different kids. So each of these features was selected for having that multiple access, for any of those types of needs. So you have for instance, the Neos. I'll just point out just a couple of them, but the Neos 360 accessible. That's actually it's actually an electronic game where there is a scoreboard, and kids can interact with it by pressing buttons, and sort of like the Simon game that some of us had when they're kind of my age, when you're following and remembering where things lit up, and you have to go through that pattern and follow it. Certain period of time you have to follow that kind of. But there's lots of different games. But the idea is that you'd have kids cheating, right? You'd have kids coordinating together to see how fast 3 of them could do it versus 2 of them could do it, that kind of thing. So but that's part of the design, is that kids are actually interacting with this thing, and it's a cool experience for them. That's just one of them. But like I said, I could walk through all those. The custom play structure is kind of a concept, but that's what that might look like. There's a tall, 18-foot tall net climber. Again, just lots of different abilities for kids to explore. As that path winds its way up, it goes past a large existing tree, and we actually preserved the tree roots there and protected them from the berm that it works through. But it gave us an opportunity to create this play tunnel, which is the number 10. So the idea would be that that area underneath that tree would be a hidden area where a kid could go in there and just have quiet space, pretend play. You could have pretend play over that bridge. And the idea of working this whole design into the existing grades, utilizing the existing trees that are there, really makes it personal and unique to its space. And that's really the part of any great design. It looks like it's been there a long time. It looks like it was designed with this intent. It's not a flat plane that you could have rolled out from any factory. It's really unique to the site. So, yeah, I'm super passionate about that, so I could talk about that for hours, but I'm not going to do that. The area then connecting, I'll call this, this is really a kind of a cool concept that's developed, and I would say that Felicia's been a big brainchild behind this whole thing. Is the idea is not only making the connection, we see a recreational trail connection being huge between these vast spaces of Gates Park, right? Getting between them is really difficult. So making that recreational trail connection, part of cutting off all of that soil off of the top of where Gates Pool is right now creates this opportunity to use that soil for something. And so not only to augment some of these constructions that we're proposing, but also creating actually earth sculptures and a prairie in this area. So the idea would be this would be an area with rolling hills with prairie on it. And then our thinking is that at first there might be mowed paths through this thing and some interpretive opportunities, not only for the nature aspect of it, but also for the African-American history that we want to interpret in this region, not only contextually with people that immigrated here and their stories, but just even some of the wider stories that are happening both now and have happened in the past. So this provides opportunities actually for a sculpture park. So we're calling this a sculpture park. The idea is that within these winding paths in the prairie, there'd be openings, there'd be opportunities for interpretive sculpture exhibits, and they could be of really any scale that you could imagine, and obviously the fundraising and all that goes into that. But the opportunities are there to really create a very unique venue, not only just making connective space, but actually making that something super unique to this area. And then we're connecting to just a little bit more detail. The existing soccer field actually has basically no drainage. We'd be looking at ways of trying to get that to drain properly and actually serve the soccer functions better than they do now. Likewise, the parking and everything, it's sort of a gravel lot, just hasn't had a lot of investment, but it does have a lot of use, particularly the Hispanic Soccer League uses that a lot. And so we really see this. We do need to relocate some playground equipment that's in the parking lot just north of here. This provides an opportunity to have that playground and a shelter located adjacent to that soccer field, served by parking lots north and south. The idea that would be that groups could have events and host events and actually have their own parking spaces and their own uses, renting out that shelter and using that space. And kind of talked about the sculpture park already, so I'll probably move beyond that. Going then to the south end of Gates, obviously that's had some recent improvements with the flood wall that was installed there, and part of this is recognizing the fact that the rest of that park really just needs a look, because it used to be where the Gates Park Basketball League was, but it's not there now, and it's not being used in that way. And it's really just not the aesthetic that the neighbors or even the region would like to have. So what we looked at here was a small organized parking lot. Again, trail connections. There's not currently a sidewalk from 4th Street over to this space, and we think that'd be really important for walkability to have a sidewalk on this side of the street. We would propose a series of mounds and trees through that area, again, utilizing the soil we brought from that north end where we cut that hill down. That provides us an opportunity to do some earth sculpting here, and what that does is really effectively screen that wall from view. From the street, you just have the look of those rolling mounds and these trees, and you wouldn't really even notice that the wall was there. We are bringing in, relocating playground equipment out of the floodway area, keeping the existing shelter and adding another small one. And then the existing restroom has probably in about the same condition as the pools, and so it needs to go away, and looking at a new restroom there and a half-court basketball with the idea that folks could be having a basketball tournament or some other event going on the top of the hill on the north side, but kids still want to go from the neighborhood and shoot baskets. We'd have an opportunity to do that here. And then on the corner, then as it narrows down next to 4th and Lester, it really, the wall is tallest there, and it's really hard to hide with any kind of vegetation. So we thought, this does provide us an opportunity. We need some signage, right? And so we looked at the existing conditions, and we looked at what would we do if we transformed that using the signage approach that we've used elsewhere, like on University Avenue. And that really does provide an opportunity with the new sidewalk, with some trees, with the mounds hiding the wall for the rest of the park. On this end, we can actually dress that up, just put a facing on the wall. Right now, it's just it's a good fabric to put something beautiful on it. That could be artwork. It could be going up 4th Street. It could be some sort of art project. It could be more of this kind of veneer look. We just haven't explored what those options are. But we were asked to look at, take a stab at what a master plan would look like, sort of ignoring budget. Sorry, Michelle. Sort of trying to think about what kinds of amenities could Gates Park offer, given the amount of land that it is, given the importance that it's had historically, given the needs of the wider park system. What does the Waterloo Park system need? And so these are the kinds of things that we plugged in. Great inclusive playground. I'd put it up with anything around. The splash pad that's, again, providing accessibility. That basketball venue is going to be amazing. And then the sculpture park, which would be totally unique. And then just fixing up things that just haven't been looked at, and really bringing them up to the standards of Waterloo. I didn't. So the sort of the blue oval around the basketball venue, the intent would be that we could have roller skating as part of the events that are held there. And that was just brought up again. I just want to acknowledge the focus group and their input on this process, and their participation here shows their interest and passion for this park. They've been great to work with. I'm excited to do some of the hard work going forward of how are we got to make some priorities and decisions. How would this be phased? How would it be funded? How do we get boots on the ground to try and find money for this, that kind of thing. But yeah, that was part of their ideas too, was just having that roller skating and that basketball and the outdoor performance area. So I really appreciate their input.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr.
question. Looking at this area here, is that actually the area behind Chamberlain's along these four?
It was the Chamberlain site, yes.
Okay, and that would be knocking down, you're saying, taking the soil off of the top of the Gates area there and transforming that area back there.
That's right. And there has been mitigation work done there already, and we'd just be working with that.
Okay, I was just
Yeah.
looking at the map and just trying to visualize it.
Yeah, and hopefully taking down a lot of that chain link fence that doesn't need to be there anymore, some of it.
Okay, thank you.
So that's maybe 8 months of work in 40 minutes, 45 minutes. There's a lot there, obviously, and a lot to digest. The city has been great to work with. The focus groups have been great to work with. The community has been great to work with. They're very invested in their facilities. I think the Parks and Recreation Department and the city as a whole has done a nice job stewarding those interests and pushing those facilities forward. So if you guys have any questions or men or women have any questions, please let us know and we'll do our best to address those. And I might look back to Mark and Matt to help me out if needs be.
Some questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I don't necessarily have a question. I just want to say thank you for putting all that time and attention into that part of town and Gates. This is where I was raised. I was raised on East 4th Street. So to see all of this done, beginning to get done to beautify this part of the city is a great thing. So thank you to the focus groups. And Felicia left, but Thank you to her and all the time and attention that you all put into this. This looks great. I was excited over here.
I wasn't trying to get too excited about the facial expressions, but yeah, it was evident.
Got me excited.
And that's what I think we wanted to do. We're not here to tell you that it's not going to come with some hard choices. And we were pretty upfront with the focus group about that as well. But we also, I think we're pretty open about, we want you to be at the table when those choices are being made. They've had a huge amount of input at this point. And I think it does speak to the city staff in that, we had a point where our public input was done, right? We had done our focus groups, we'd done our open house, we'd done our survey, but we all looked at each other on the table and was like, we haven't heard enough from that community and we haven't heard enough from that neighborhood. And that's going to become really important with whatever projects we move forward with the city as a whole and with that park. So I think that speaks to the interest in making sure that everyone's voices were heard and represented. So,
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
To kind of piggyback on what Mia is saying, I'm looking out here in the audience and I see some of the young people out here who have provided some input as far as what they want to see happen in their community. So thank you all out there for doing what you're doing to try and make our community what it needs to be.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So this is a question for Paul, and I do want to thank all the folks who were involved in this process. I was very impressed. We talked a little bit about equity of access in terms of financials, but we also know that if we're going to have just one pool facility on the south side of town, we have to talk about equity of transportation. Is that something that will be coming up in the draft plan as well, Mr. Hudding?
We've had that discussion, and we recognize that. We're actually currently working, and I'm going to put Mark on the spot and have him come up, but we're currently working with Waterloo Schools to expand our regular lesson offerings to a broader net of people at Central. And that's a Learn to Swim program. That's a very basic Learn to Swim program for people who don't know how to swim. But to answer your question more directly, we're planning on implementing some sort of a tram or trolley or whatever you want to call it to go between these two parks, because we feel there are so many amenities at both of them, new amenities, that there's going to be that cross utilization with everyone in the community. We'd like to be able to get kids from one side of the town to the other for, the spray park is going to be, look at the problems we've had with US Bank's parking lot because of our current spray park. It's a good problem, but I think it'll be better when we're able to expand, but to access that and the basketball courts and all the other things that were mentioned here. So Mark, do you want to just real briefly address the idea and what we're currently implementing and how the Learn to Swim for the North Waterloo community is being addressed now and how it might be moving forward?
We have a great partnership with Waterloo Schools where they'll bus kids to indoor aquatic facilities. And it's not like our typical Learn to Swim program where it's 10 days and you're getting hammered on strokes. It's basically drowning prevention. It's how we treat it is you're at Cedar River Park, you accidentally get in too far. How can you either get yourself back to shore or how can your buddy get out there and help you? We know we're not going to teach them to be Olympic swimmers in a 4-week program, but at least get them where they can be safe and at least be somewhat comfortable around the water, at least to save themselves. And I agree with Paul. I think the bus seemed a little weird when we didn't know what gates would be, and it felt like a one-way trip. But now it definitely feels like a 2-way trip that kids could take and pretty much burn a whole day.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
And would be for Paul or Mark. And the importance of the 2-way trip is that when you look at your diagram for the aquatic center, we're going to be taking out basketball courts.
Correct.
So we won't have basketball courts at Burns Park. That people, they're used a lot. And that way, if we had that transportation going both directions, kids that normally go to Burns Park or could get on that bus or that trolley or whatever and go over to the Gates Park area and use that entire facility, as well as people from the Gates Park area come over for either swim lessons or the aquatic center. So I think it's a win-win.
Just real briefly, and then I'll sit down. Next steps. We always want to talk about next steps. We hope to have this master plan, both of them, taken to the Leisure Services Commission for endorsement. And then we would ask that this group endorse them however way, Mayor, you think is best to do it, whether it's a consensus or if you really want to have a resolution endorsing it. But moving forward, when we get into fundraising, we need the full support of the Leisure Services Commission, and most of the commissioners are out here today. We'll probably have something on our February agenda for at least discussion, and maybe if we have the finished plan, I think the aquatics plan, Darren, we may have by then. So we're looking for official endorsement. That's going to help us moving forward to access the funding we need.
And I would think the funders want to know the council is 100% behind this. So we can sit down and talk about strategy.
Okay.
You, Kelly, Michelle, and I, and Mark, see how we want to package this to get it back before the council.
And one clarification, Joel is here from building maintenance, and he's the guy. He's not, you wouldn't know this, but he's not with Parks and Recreation. He's with building maintenance, and he's the pools guy, and he's been the magician for a number of years. In fact, I'm done. Thank you all.
Yeah, and you know, when you talked about the usefulness of the pools, we are probably beyond, 10, 15 years of the usefulness. So, Joel, they've had to work some miracles to even get it to where it's working. And I thought they could use that one sealant that sticks like that, but I think where we miss out at, structurally, the guts of the pool, right, the motors and all those things that we can't see, that's in dire need right now. And so I appreciate the conversation. Paul can tell you we've been taking a look at this Gates master plan for 10 years now, trying to get the pieces together to get to where we're at. So appreciate your level of communication with those in that area. Like Councilwoman, I grew up in that area, and so it's good to see everything that's taking place, from the park that we're taking a look at to the most recent developments that's happening with Verdon Creek and the new North Crossing. So this is an area that is really blossoming and blooming, and this is going to do nothing but increase our chances for continued growth for the future. And last but not least, I hate to use this cliche about building back better, but the reason I use that, because we get in such a monotony of doing the things the same way we have always done them. But when you start to really take a deep dive into what the neighbors want, what the community want, there's tough decisions that are involved in it. But I think we've done our due diligence to try to gather all those thoughts and that the input, so that we can make it something that is for today, and not trying to fulfill what we did yesterday. So I'm appreciative of all the efforts and work that everyone has done to kind of put all the pieces together today.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions before we? All right.
I wasn't as excited as Nia was when I was putting the PowerPoint together, but I said to Paul and I said to Mark that, when you do these all over the country, some of them you go ahead and as you're putting it together and you're part of a team that's putting it together and you're kind of looking through and you're like, we might have missed a mark here, or we might have not had enough there. I never got that feeling when we were putting this together to go ahead and share with you tonight. It really felt like we checked all the boxes in terms of the different data points and the contacts within the community and the legwork that was done ahead of time. And that's a testament to your community and the involvement and the investment that they have. So it's been a pleasure working with you guys.
Well, data is good, but equity is important.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
We took an equitable lens on this project to give the community what they actually believe that they need. And that's the way that we need to be doing business all around. So thank you. Appreciate you. And that is all.